comparison operators and filtering. This is going to kind of start to wrap up some of the commands we've been dealing with that work with generic objects. You've met select and sort, and now we're going to start working with one that's designed for filtering, but we have to do that by understanding how to tell the shell what it is we want to filter, and that's where comparison operators will come into our little conversation. In this nugget, we'll start with some basic comparison operators, and because a lot of the comparisons you'll be performing will involve string comparisons, we'll also look at a very cool wildcard string comparison. And in the event that you want to do multiple comparisons, we'll look at some basic Boolean operators that let you do that. All of this, though, is building up to the goal of filtering items out of the pipeline, getting a bunch of things, and then getting rid of the ones you don't want. We're also going to talk about a subtopic there, which is some ways to sometimes not have things you don't want in the pipeline to begin with, because if they're not there, you don't need to have the computer spend time getting them out. We'll begin, as usual, in Windows 7, where I have a copy of PowerShell 2. Much of what we're going to talk about applies to PowerShell 2 and later, so we'll spend a lot of our time here, and we're going to start spending that time on comparison operators. Let's look at some really simple ones. Now, we've already kind of learned that plus, minus, division, multiplication, you're probably already familiar with those. In fact, if you've done any kind of programming in just about any programming language or scripting language, you probably know about some comparison operators too. Greater than, less than or equal to. Sometimes you'll see not equal to done like that. Sometimes it'll be, not equal to. Equality. Some programming languages do that with multiple, two equal signs. So if you're already familiar with those, that's too bad. I need you to reach deep inside your brain where that information is stored and just flick it out, because that is not how PowerShell rolls. We've got 5 equal to 5. We've got 5 not equal to 10. 5 is greater than 3. 3 is less than 10. 5 is greater than or equal to 5. 5 is less than or equal to 10. If we're doing string comparisons, hello equals hello. Oh, missed my quotation mark there. Hello equals hello. Hello does not equal goodbye. And just if you're keeping score, these are case insensitive, so you need to put a C in front of the operator name if you want it to be case sensitive. We also have a wildcard comparator, a wildcard operator. Hello is like star L star, meaning star can be one or more other characters. So long as there's an L in there somewhere, this would have returned true. Again, case sensitive or case insensitive. If you need to make it case sensitive, you put a C on the front. You can also reverse the logic. C not like. Go back to this one. Not like, right? Hello is not like L. Tortured grammar here with these double negatives, but so those are all the basic comparison operators that we're going to play with. You're going to have to remember those because they're going to come into play in a number of different ways that we'll do filtering. We also have the ability to do these with variables, obviously. So let's say services equals get service. If services 0 is that, then services 0 status is that, and I can check to see if it is running, and it is not. So you can get very, very, very specific with these things. Comparison operators are good in a number of different situations, and we're going to start putting them to use. And the way we'll do that is to put a bunch of things into the pipeline and pipe them to a command called whereObject. WhereObject essentially takes a single parameter called filter script. Now, anything in these curly brackets is fair game, so long as, at the end of the day, whatever's in these curly brackets returns true or false. So this is going to execute this filter script once for each object that we piped into whereObject. So if I pipe in 100 services, this filter script is going to run 100 times. Inside the filter script, I can use $_ to refer to whatever got piped into whereObject. So I'm going to check and see if its status is equal to running. This is going to return true or false because it's a comparison. If it returns true, then the object continues down the pipeline. If it returns false, then the object gets voted off the island and goes away forever. Practical upshot being, I get a list of all the running services. Let's do some Booleans. Let's throw an AND in here. This is going to give me all the services whose status property equals running and whose name property starts with an S. There we go. You can get it as complicated as you want to with these things. You can put a minus or in here. That'll give me all the services that are either running or whose names start with an S. And then from there I can pipe it onto whatever else I want. Let's just do a format wide. I'll change this back to an AND so we get a little bit less output. So they get continued down the pipeline. Now, for better or for worse, you're probably never going to see the syntax typed like this. Filter script is positional. No one ever types it. If you're lucky, this is what you're going to see. Most folks won't even do that. They'll use the alias where. And in fact, a lot of folks will use the alias question mark. And then I guess if we're going to get really, really, really short, we could use the alias GSV for get service. And now you can look at that and it's all punctuation and no one will have any idea what it means. So that's the basic where object command. Again, you can put anything you want to inside that filter script provided the end result is either true or false. So let me show you another way to look at that. Let's do get process. I'm going to select the first one and have it display all the properties for that, because I want to point out a property called responding. Responding is either true or false. So let's say I wanted to get a list of all the processes that are responding to Windows, meaning they're not locked up. I could start with get process, pipe it to where. Inside my filter script, I'll do $_ responding, and I'll just check to see if it equals true. I'm using $true, there's also $false, to represent that Boolean true-false value. And out of this, I want to do a format wide with the property name. So those are all the processes that are responding to Windows. The point is, if something is already true or false, you don't need to compare it to true or false, right? All that's important is that this filter script result in true or false, because I'm using a property that is inherently already true or false. I don't need a comparison. I'll get the same results. Now, what's probably more interesting is a list of processes that are not responding, which I can do by using the -not operator. That simply reverses the logic. What this means is if there's a process out there whose responding property is false, this is going to make it true, which will allow it to continue down the pipeline and be displayed. If the process is responding to Windows, this will be true. Not will make it false. It'll get voted off the island and it won't be in my final output. Now, I got no output. That's good. That means all my processes are responding to Windows. That's good news. Sometimes you really do have to think about the logic of your commands. Sometimes no output is exactly what you asked the command to do. It doesn't mean you did something wrong. And in this case, everything's responding. I was hoping for no output, and I got none, which is all good news. So that's how things look in version 2 of Windows PowerShell. Transporting ourselves over to Windows 8 and version 3 of PowerShell, everything that I just showed you is still true. However, we have some new options. Let's do a similar example. Get service, pipe to where object, $_status equals running. Now this is case insensitive. I'm only typing a capital R because I'm a neat typist. I could do a lowercase r. That'll still work. So that was the version 2 syntax. In version 3, we can substitute PS item instead of $_. So if $_ just freaks out your brain, you can do this instead if it helps. Get the same results. PowerShell version 3 also introduces a shortened syntax. Put the command name. And you type it like that instead. Now if your values contain a string, or a space or some kind of white space, then you would put them in quotation marks. And that's going to do exactly the same thing. So we've got this little shorter format. The trick with this little shorter format is that it will only work for a single comparison. There's no way for me to do an and here. I could add another where object. Now, you got a couple of things that you got to remember here. First of all, this shortened syntax is actually faster than the old curly bracket syntax. It's able to chunk through this and execute this a little faster. But in this case, I'm kind of not doing a great thing. I'm getting maybe 100 services. I'm then going to return about 50 services that are running, and then I'm returning, what is this, about 10 services that aren't. So this still has to compare 100 items, and this has to compare 50 items that are left from it. So these successive wheres are not really a good performance thing. In fact, if you remember in the previous nugget, we talked about formatting, and I said that the rule in PowerShell was to format to the right. Get your formatting as far to the right or to the end of the command line as possible. So format right. Well, we've got a corollary, which is filter left. If you're going to filter something, you want the filtering to occur as early in your command line as possible. Now in this case, you might look at this and think, well, we've got it as early as possible. I would probably disagree. I would probably say that if you've got multiple criteria, it would make more sense to switch over to the older format so that you can get all of the filtering done in a single step. Now, I'm even going to go you one better. Take a look at the get service command. And I got to keep emphasizing this. Make sure you're looking at the full help for this command, yeah? Because we can specify the name of a service. See right here? Let's look at that name parameter. That name parameter accepts wildcards. That means that maybe what I should be doing instead is moving my filtering even further. Get service minus name s star where status equals running. I couldn't move all of the filtering to the first command, but I could move some of it. So the more of the filtering you can move to the beginning of the command line, the better off you will be. That's a standard rule. In other words, instead of putting 100 services in the pipeline and making where scan through them all and get rid of half of them, try and put just what you want in the pipeline to begin with. And in a lot of cases, you're going to run across commands that provide an explicit filter parameter. Here's the get AD user command, and you can see that it actually has a mandatory filter parameter. So rather than saying, and I swear I will see people do this. What do we want to do? Display name, let's say. They'll do something like that. Got nothing back, that's fine. That's not moving the filtering as far to the beginning of the command line as possible. There is quite clearly a filter parameter that will do that work for us. The trick is, when a PowerShell command offers you a minus filter parameter, whatever you provide is probably being passed to the underlying technology. In this case, it's Active Directory. With other commands, it would be different technologies. You usually have to specify the filter language in whatever the underlying technology wants, meaning you're not going to necessarily be using PowerShell style language to specify your filter criteria. In order to figure out what you are going to use, you're going to have to read the help. And typically, if we get down to the filter parameter here, there's a bazillion examples of exactly what that parameter wants. And then when we get down to the bottom of this help file into the actual examples, we see even more examples. So if you're going to do the best performing command lines possible, meaning you're getting the filtering as early in the command as possible. Sometimes that's going to involve using a minus filter parameter. And when you do that, you're going to have to read the help to figure out what kind of criteria it actually wants to see. We do get a new way of doing filtering in version 4 of PowerShell, as you'll see here on Windows 8.1. Before, obviously you can still do everything you did before. Let's just do a simple get service where $_ or if you want a $PS item from version 3, that still works. Status equals running. No problem with that. So let's just take this script block that we used to use with the where object command, clipboard it. Now the trick is, if I execute, let's just clear the screen. If I execute that command as a parenthetical, the output of that parenthetical is a collection of service objects. Now PowerShell version 4, when you have a collection, adds a where method. So this appears in parentheses, and as an argument, it takes that same script block that you would have used with the where object command. So essentially, because we're not referring to a single object, this represents multiple objects, we get this where method. That's not a method of a service. It's not a method of any single object. It's a method of a collection. And so it's going to run through each object in that collection and execute this script block. If the script block returns true, then the method outputs that object. So we should just get a list of running services. And we do. So just another way that you can do things in PowerShell version 4. So we've gotten some basic comparison operators, the wildcard string comparisons with like out of the way, and also some basic Boolean operators and or. In the next nugget, we're going to be getting into a lot more operators, all of which could potentially have use in filtering items out of the pipeline using where object, which was really the goal of this entire nugget. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.